Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 496. We're getting close to our 500 mark. We're well into our 10th year, coming towards our beginning of 11th. It's amazing to think that we have had the privilege of broadcasting every week and never missing a show or episode during this entire 10-year stretch. That is actually pales in comparison to our podcast, which is running now for 19 years. We're coming up on our 19th year, I guess, which is also amazing to think that we are doing that for that long. With that in mind, thank you so much for joining us live. If you're watching us on our simulcast of LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, pages, channels, Twitch, but most importantly, if you're watching us on our TV channel, the Hospitality Channel, which you can get on Roku TV, Amazon TV, Google TV, Apple TV, all smart TVs. Just look for the Hospitality Channel. The show is always on the free side of the pay gateway. There is a pay gateway for more additional content if you're interested. And for everyone that is watching us because they are part of the Hospitality Marketing Club, thank you so much for doing so as well. It's a peer level group. It's a closed loop. It's not on Facebook or anything like this. It's its own closed loop on a platform that's ours. And it allows for peer level discussion about hospitality marketing. So there is the self pitch that allowed people to get in on the live broadcast around the world, which is still amazing that people at odd time zones follow us and watch us live during this time. Thank you. We're in 209 countries with the TV channel. So it's fun to think that we are global when it comes to our conversations related to this. We do have a lot of domestic U.S. conversations that we normally have, but today's topic is actually a very broad perspective topic that happens to just about everybody in some capacity, form, or other. And strangely enough, it's not always related to our marketing department per se, but it's a problem that exists, and that is lost account owners changing contracts. It's the island of broken toys. What do we mean by this? Well, as always, the show is a reflection of real-time circumstances that I deal with per week or in weeks of conversations and engagements with clients and coworkers and people in the industry, and conferences I speak with, and presentations at colleges I do and so forth, that things come up. Pardon me. I had to get a swallow of water. So, what do we mean by lost account owners changing contracts and being the island of broken toys, which is a metaphor for the Christmas special that actually came back to production or to broadcast this past Christmas holiday, where they refer to the island of broken toys. What I often find is when you have problems in softwares and you actually have service contract with vendors and so forth, the people that sit in the chairs change. The person that initiated the contract, negotiated the contract, the person that worked with the contract in its inception on the other side, or the software service provider that changed the account managers on the other side. There's always a carousel of people, legitimately so, for promotions, change of careers, so forth. And so the players change, but the contracts are what stays. The softwares, the platforms are what stays. And what you get is a migration of somebody that now assumes the role that was vacated, or the position that is in collaboration. And they can be very familiar with what is a part of the relationship or the program, but they're not intimate with it in the purest of sense for the people that created that relationship or founded that service and the platform usage and so forth. And so a lot of nuances get lost. A lot of details about it get lost. A very dear friend of mine who just recently retired this back to October of last year, Bonnie Buchheiser, brilliant woman when it comes to hospitality revenue management. She had her own company for decades. She used to refer to it as a Xerox training. And when we were traveling around to multiple cities for HSMEI's Rocket program, this was a part of her presentation as to the dilution of education that we experience in our industry. Not that we're monopolistic to it. It happens everywhere, but it happens to us. And that is, you get a software to do something for you. You've bought a software to provide services to your business, revenue management software, marketing software, some software. And your team at the time is trained on the usage of that software. Now, it's a pretty well-known fact. We don't retain everything that's taught to us at the time, a lot of times we learn from rote. You mean learning by using. So even though we may in our head retain some of the education, it's not until we actually practically begin to use it that we learn more from it, or at least solidify what it is that we did learn. An estimate of that, just to be fair in general, is about 40%. So here you have a person that was first person trained on a platform and service. And that person retained about 40% of everything that was presented to them. And now they're leaving. They're being moved on or what have you. Hopefully there was a transition process, not an abrupt one. I'm being optimistic and saying transition process. Now that person is responsible for training the person that's going to assume their role that they're stepping from. And so now you have a person that has 40% retention of what they were trained, teaching the next person. Well, knowing that the metrics are relatively the same, now you have 40% retention of the second person from 40% of the origin. You can see where, and this goes back to showing age, the Xerox method comes in. Xeroxing, for those who are unfamiliar, way back in the day when you Xeroxed something, the more you continue to copy a copy, the worse the copy got. It got very shabby looking. And so that's where the metaphor comes in, that the dilution and the clarity and the accuracy of the training gets lost generationally as it gets handed down to the next person to succeed it. Why do I bring this up about lost encounters and changing contracts? Because what ends up happening a lot of times is that things begin to not work at a level that the software is originally intended to handle. And given the politics of any business, there's always the what's at fault, who's at fault conversations. Why is this not doing this anymore, so forth. So they go to the software provider who, up to this point, didn't know there was a problem, perhaps. And they're told of what's going on. And they're baffled because in their perspective, perhaps the software should be doing that for them. And sometimes the problem can be easily resolved in the sense that they realize that the person that's on the other side of the phone or the screen is not fully trained on the platform. And if they're a good account manager, they realize that and they recommend that the person become refamiliarized with the platform and all of its capacities so that they can use it to the full utilization that they purchased. Regrettably, though, the account managers on the other side tend to not be that sensitive. They're defensive. They're being told that it's something on their side that's wrong. It's something that's wrong with the software, something that they're doing wrong. And unfortunately, if their infrastructure politically is also derogatory, they're going to blame the account manager. And the person that's now sitting in the chair, and they may not have been the first person sitting in that chair for this account, gets dumped on all the problems that have happened. Now, we've had shows before where we talked about the dynamics of communication, about how to improve the relationship between those who do supporting services for your business and what you're asking of them, and how you police them and how you engage with them. Knowing that we've talked about that, and not to try to rehash too much of that today, it breaks down into a defensive role between place of who's at fault for why this isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And then it turns into why we are still doing it and whether we have to replace it and so forth and so on. What ended up happening most of the times when I stepped into these conversations is to realize that the people that I'm talking to are not the originators, but they're the inheritors of this program. And that if they were to take a step back and be less worried about who's at fault and focus more on how do we fix it, you would find a willing collaboration on both sides. Like, they don't want to be blamed. And if they can show that they were able to be a part of the success of making it work again, that they would get the accolades that they're trying to avoid the pains from. That people would think, wow, these guys really know that's great. When we put the right person in the right place, they solve the problem, so forth and so on. So that's an easy fix when it's that obvious. What ends up not being obvious is that there are always conditions and changes and nuances as to why a product was brought in as a service that only the person that signed the contract knows. They know that they brought that on because at the time there was problem X, and this software or service provided a solution to problem X. Now, it's not all that they did, but that was the reason that they were brought in. Well, now that person, the originator of that contract's inception, is no longer there to redefine why this vendor was brought in. This vendor also has transitioned in who's doing what with when, and they know that there's just an account. They've been billing. They do what they've been doing with this, and they too have lost track of what is the value relationship between both of us. And then in the vendor side, they begin to see, well, what is it that we can make more money from? We have this engagement with this contract. We're only doing this. They're only using it for this. but we do all these other things, or we've added these things that maybe they didn't know about us adding. So they try to resolicit the relationship with the client to tell them all the stuff they could do. What this creates is a changing contract in the sense that now the client can begin to get confused, because if they brought in company Z to handle problem X, and they have company A handling problem Y, and company Z says, well, we do Y as well. So now they're like, well, let's go look at whether or not this is a better answer to Y than the company A is. And then company A goes, wait a minute. Well, if you're going to challenge us on having this other company do what we're doing for you, we're also going to challenge that company on that we can do stuff for X as well. So now the client's thinking that they're very in a happy relationship. That, wow, I now have these two vendors that are, Shark Tank fighting each other to get my business. So I can negotiate prices better. I can get the best quality service of it. Those two don't go together. Getting the best price doesn't mean getting the best quality. Best price means you get the best contract relationship with somebody that's willing to pitch for a less dollar. They're on their mind thinking how they can reduce their cost factor to make that dollar work for them. So getting better quality for a lower price isn't in necessary harmony. So that's a bad part about when you're negotiating contracts. So they go and look at whether or not another company could solve more problems for them that they had an alternate company doing at the time. So they choose that. What happens is they lose the continuity of what that other company did. Now, all of the history of what was done successfully for solving problem X leaves with the company that no longer, or lost the negotiation battle of what they did for company X, or for problem X. And so company Z's out of it. So all their history, everything, and they send it back to you flat. Here's your stuff not functioning the way we used to function because that was our stuff. And here's the stuff that was your stuff. Per our contract, excuse me again for taking a drink of water. So company A now is in charge of the problem X. And they go in and they don't know how it was built or why it was built the way it was. And they're going to interpret it to what they have priced themselves to solve. So where company Z may have been very granular about their solution process, company A might be very superficial about their solution process because they have to minimize their cost for how they won the bid to now handle problem X. And so now things aren't working right. And you've lost the continuity of what services for providing what services in the best way. All of this kind of goes to lost account owners, changing contracts. And on a good side of the same conversation, sometimes there's solutions in place for a problem that were political in nature or temporary in nature or single solutions in nature that no longer have the same value that created them in the first place. But because it's always been done that way, they continue to do it that way. And so the invoice still gets paid and the business still gets done for whatever worth and value it creates. Now, what doesn't get done internally and what should get done, and this is what I recommend to clients when these circumstances are they bring to my attention for help, is that there needs to be a journal, kind of a dear self journal. Why are we in business for this? Why did we hire this company? What process did we do? A little bit of history and nostalgia. Now, before we used to have the great excuse of, I'm not here to write a novel. I'm not here to spend most of my time recording what I'm doing because I'll end up spending more of almost all my time recording about stuff I'm no longer doing because I'm spending so much time recording. Nowadays, we have wonderful AI that we can talk to and then it'll reformat it into a more readable format. Recording is just for recording, so we'll transcribe it over and categorize it and organize it and say, okay, here's a summary of what you've said. So you can ramble as much as you want like I do, and it'll clarify it and quantify it into a position that now if somebody else reads it, it makes sense to them. Doing these chronological stories helps in the continuity of what was the inception of what we're doing, what processes we go through to solve that problem, what was the dialogues and the final solutions as it was settled, and the purposes and what we dealt with, and what the highlights were, and the reasons, and the pain points, and the solutions that were offered. All of that can now get put together, so that when that same person that put it together is no longer there, the next person that's sitting in their chair can go, so we have company Z doing this work. What put them in that role? Let me go look. And they get to take this off the shelf metaphorically and look at the story of why company Z is doing the work. This gives insight and perspective. Sometimes it helps them in creating the contrast that they need if they're looking at other alternatives other than company Z, to balance company Z's historical worth versus a new company in comparison. They might see that all the things that brought company Z into inception with them no longer are valid, or promises broken, that they aren't doing those things anymore, that they've really sat on their laurels and cashed their checks and didn't fulfill what they were to do. Maybe they started fulfilling it, but because nobody was paying attention to them, they slacked and stepped back and eventually just took the money and ran kind of mentality. Who knows? Or maybe they turned into an invaluable relationship, that this was the inception of a relationship that grew so much more than what they first came in on. Any of those variations plus more can be in the journaling that you do on the history of what you did to bring them into business. The same on the other side of the conversation for the accountant. There should be an account journal, account chronological journal, as to where this came from, how did this get to be where it is now, and what are we doing about what our relationship means to us for them. So that no matter who sits in the chair from the service side, they get the rich history of the responsibility that they now have, rather than I hope they don't ask me something I don't know about because I'm new to the position. And that's usually a deflection that usually happens early on. It's like, what about such and such? Well, I'll have to look into that because, I'm new to the position on your account, so I have to figure that all out. And the client side sighs and thinking, oh my God, I have to go back to the beginning to explain to this person. And believe me, this happens, as you all know. They go through the whole time to recount where they are, of why they're working with this account and the services and so forth. And that very person that they brought up to speed, just as they begin to get settled into what they're doing with it, because they now know the whole backstory and they get yanked or terminated or whatever, and it goes back to zero. And then the client again goes, okay, I'm not going to waste as much time, because look at this. I spent all this time getting this next person up to speed, and then they're gone. So this third person gets a more abbreviated aspect of it. And then that happens again. Eventually what will happen is either the client doesn't care to keep the next person updated because it's just a waste of time in their perspective, or they're so abbreviated in their review of it that there's no depth. The value of it goes away, because then the new account manager that's running it truly doesn't understand what the history of it is. And, both sides begin to not care. The agency doesn't keep their records. The client's tired of being the one responsible for keeping the agency up to date as to what the relationship should be from what its inception was created for. And maybe even the client changes. And now you have people, like I said, at both sides of the conversation that have no depth of understanding of why the relationship exists. Now, there is a more tangible aspect to this lost account owners changing contracts than just the collaboration value and the optimization of the relationships. Now, I'm skipping a stone here. I'm not talking about service contracts and service types and details of service and logistics about what the relationship could exist for. We've actually, as I said, had conversations in previous shows, and you can look them up on our hospitalitychannel.tv. Just look for topics of contracts and or vendors, and you'll see the shows that are related to this in the search query. The part that I find incredibly important to focus on when it comes to lost account owners and changing contracts doesn't directly relate to marketing, revenue management per se, as it is accounting and operations. The forgotten two aspects of the fulfillment of what we do. Now, I'm going to keep it to the marketing contracts and the revenue management contracts, because operational contracts, maintenances and repairs and cost factors of equipment and so forth, is a discussion into its own. But when it comes to accounts and marketing and so forth, we unfortunately do not include accounting and operations in our full circle of communication when it comes to what we're doing, who we're doing it with, what it's costing us to do this, and what we measure about it. Accounting, from anybody from an operational perspective or any departmental, accounting and human resources are pervasive in every department aspect of every department. There is nothing about any department that doesn't touch either of those two, accounting and human resources. Both of those departments are involved in everything. That being said, accounting is not kept up to date. Accounting does not know all of the conditions surrounding a contract. Here is the painful reality of accounting. Accounting is handed a new contract. Now, yes, you may roll your eyes thinking, well, we're going to be sympathetic to accounting. They make me jump through hoops. Yes, they do. They make you say you can't have this account unless it has this, and this is confirmed, and this vendor's approved, and all the rules and SOPs about creating a new account or running an account or how you're supposed to handle the documentation related to the account. All said and good. Outside of that conversation, the reality of what I'm talking about is the accounting office to know what it is that they are handling in the context of what to look out for. They receive an invoice. According to what you gave them and what they have as information from the contract, this invoice is from a legitimate vendor for legitimate purposes, for legitimate business. And so it's to be paid according to the hierarchy of allocations of funding and prioritizations as to getting paid in terms and conditions of the contract and so forth. That's their world. And it's not up always to them to chase down exceptions to it and or variances that should raise a flag of wondering what it is. And what ends up happening in this changing world of who created the account on yours not being in the chair anymore, the account manager on the side that signed it not being in the chair anymore, is that nobody knows the details surrounding the relationship at the levels of what it comes to. And accounting's out there printing checks because that's according to the contract what they were told. And in accounting, there could be position changes. So the person that's handling these accounts for payment and processing and everything else was never shared what to look for if something's not what it should be. Billing that seems different, billing that's off, billing that includes something that didn't include it before, billing that has details that aren't matching the details from before. They don't have the continuity of understanding the whole account. So for them, they follow the process that they were shown when they were shown the position. This is your chair, this is your table, this is your computer, this is what you process. When this comes in, this is what you do with it. This is how it gets handled. That's what they do. That's their process. They're not the gatekeepers for what the account represents. They need to be aware of what the account represents so they can look at something and go, that doesn't seem to be what it should be. Now, they could be wrong, they could be right, but by asking the question, they're right all the time. Hey, guys, I'm noticing that we're getting billing for XYZ. Is that correct? Now, hopefully somebody on your side isn't a dork and says, well, if it's in the contract, this was supposed to be. No, they want to see and understand what that is. And that they'll take the time to say, well, okay, that account is handling our paid Google ads. Okay, so let's contact them and have them verify what that billing is for. That the process happens. Okay. Now, accountants love talking to accountants. Same lack of depth is on both sides when it comes to this. An accountant from the client side talks to the accountant from the vendor side saying, I have a billing for such and such. Well, the accountant on the other side says, yes, I was told that that's being processed through your account. Oh, there's not a level of depth of understanding what the contract is to know whether or not that is correct or incorrect. So they have to talk to the level up of the people that are engaged with the value of the contract for them to ask each other, wait a minute, you shouldn't be doing Google ads for us. Why are we getting Google ad payments? Oh, you're right. We misassigned the account number. Good catch. We're so sorry. We'll have that removed. We'll correct the voucher, whatever it is. That knowledge circle between accounting, the person familiar with the contract, and the relationship with the vendor, and vice versa, gets lost. Another aspect that happens from this, outside of the accounting potentialities of it, is that the value of the relationship gets lost when the people that are inheriting these relationships don't understand the purpose of the relationship. Politically, when somebody assumes a new role and they have the responsibility and the authority to review and categorize which vendors have the relationships with what they're responsible for, you get one of two things. Well, one of three things. One, affirmation of the existence of what's going on, and then the expansion therefrom. Two, uh, an a absolute disdain for anybody that's not their relationship, in the sense that I want my vendors that I know, people that I've worked with. So even though these people may be performing with whatever level that there was success, I'm booting them and I'm putting my vendors, the vendors I like working with, in their place. And they just got to smooth out of what the change of effect would be. And the third is apathy. Just that's okay. It's not broken. I'll deal with stuff that is. There's good and bad for all of those ones. There is a good aspect, strangely enough, for someone that has preferential relationships, because it challenges the status quo to redefine their value proposition, to reinforce why they're the ones having the relationship and not a potential other vendor that is more familiar to the person that's assumed the new account. The wholesale removal of them, regardless of proving that their success, is simply to replace it in with a friend. Good luck with those guys. Yes, I've seen it. I've witnessed watching the replacement of good services with crappy services, just because the crappy services knew how to play golf with the person that's now in the chair. Kid you not. And we all can shake our head about that. We sometimes wonder where some of these contracts from. We make jokes about the fact who played golf with who is kind of the political acceptable way of saying that, I guess. So you have these changes and transitions. With those changes, you get a whole loss of what happened before, obviously, and plus two, you have a problem with, maybe the problem was solved in a unique way, which is what they got the contract with them for, and now you've kicked them out. And the new company, blind to the depth of it, now is taking it on and can't fix the same problem because they don't have the capability of doing what the other company that you just kicked out did. Now, having been the one that's been brought in and having been the one that's been kicked out, I can tell you this: it is best for all vendors to be professional and heart of the servant and do what's best, and offer any opportunity to help with transition of, here's your data, this is the way to understand, this is the platform capabilities and whatever, and give whatever it is. I always go from the perspective that whatever is built is the asset of the client first, and we're giving process to it. So that should we no longer continue a relationship, which, that's what we do. Sometimes we come and fix things and we leave, which is our whole purpose. Like, tell us what you want done, we go. That's what we do. We don't try to linger for no reason. But we always try to come from the idea that whatever we build is your asset, and we operate it with your permission, so that if we do part ways, and when we do part ways, whoever you have to maintain or operate through it is just having to be given the access and the capabilities. And we journal what we do clearly, so that the people that are taking on what we have built understand its intent, purpose, and value, so that they can do whatever they do with it, but it's handed over in the optimum of what it was created for. And that continuity is helpful, because then it happens a lot. We get brought back in because they fell short of their goals, and we have to go over and fix what they ended up not doing well. And we already know historically what we had built it to, so that there's a way of short circuiting the time it takes to correct for issues that came out of it. I guess that's all politically correctly to say. So anyways, so you have this inheritance of things where you don't know why something's in place and then people say, well, until I know what it's for, I can't outwardly just take it and turn it off. And then sadly, you have some people that just go in and they want to rip and gut and pull the wires out of the wall and figure out how to put the wires back together as they learn it. And I do see a lot of people that want to show that they're in charge now, and they go in and just gut everything. Tell everybody they're on notice. You're out. Start feeding me all the stuff that you're out the door. I'm going to put somebody in your place. I'm going to put an RFP out, and you can reply to it. You might come back in the door, but it's not under the current contract relationship. And they're blinded to the fact that it was a great contract price, or maybe not. Maybe this is a good chance to renegotiate the contract. They might be blinded to the fact that they're kicking out longstanding relationships that, even if they do make it back in, should they be interested, you have damaged the trust relationship, so that they're not as forthcoming as they were before, simply because you made them go through this process. There's lots of nuances to all of this, but the idea that as time goes forward, change follows it. The people that create contracts no longer are there. The people that ran the contracts are no longer there. It changes on both sides of the conversation. All of the departments need to understand what the value of the contract is and how and what it's supposed to be charged for need to be included. That includes accounting, operations, and so forth, so that they understand what their responsibility is when they're looking at it, that they can evaluate it as to whether there's something that should be brought to other people's attention. The understanding what the contract's origins are and the continuity of what brought it to where it is that you inherited it is a gift that keeps on giving over time, because as the people change, the continuity continues. It's an edict that I always gave my team, that when you get into a new role, here is the history of that role. Here's the history of what that role is responsible for. And it's now your responsibility to keep that history forward. So when the person sits in the chair behind you, after you move on to what your next role is, that person has the benefit of what you now have, plus yours, and the continuity of what you did, how it was created, what it's there for, what it was for, who were you working with and why, what the issues were, what the things you need to be mindful of. It's like a dear self journal that you keep, that you can pass on to the person that now sits in your chair after you. I did it as a GM, I did it as department head, I did it in corporate, I did it persistently, so that there was this fact that there's this journal. If they failed and didn't keep it up afterwards, well, then it turns into a history journal. Back in the day when, who knows? So anyways, that's my point today. Lost account owners, changing contracts, the island of broken toys. We inherit them. We also have to know what to do with them when we have them. So with that, I thank everyone for watching me live today. Thank you so much for those that will listen to me on the recast. We recast 11:30 a.m. Wednesday mornings for both London and Sydney, Australia time. Sydney, Australia for the APAC time zones, and London, of course, for the EU and Mideast time zones. Other than that, you can always catch us on forever reruns on the hospitalitychannel.tv website, along with our audio podcast, which today is one of the unique days that the podcast is not going to mirror today's live show. Instead of talking about tools and so forth, we're going on this crazy venture about an AI voice agent creation, which is just insanely, wow, goosebumpily, like technology-wise. So that'll be a fun conversation too. But our podcasts are also on the hospitalitychannel.tv channel. Website. You can go to our app for iOS or Google Play. Just look for Hospitality Channel. Our app is there. The show's on the app is a free broadcast all the time. You can watch the show there. You can ping me anytime by sending me an email at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I answer every email related to the podcast and the TV show. You can also reach to me audibly at hdm.news/talkback. I do an audio question every week for the podcast, and also solicit any feedback of what you think we should talk about, or feedback in general for anything. So please do that. Trying to think if there's anything. Oh, our radio station, the Hospitality Radio Station. Always catch that. We're in 39 countries. We do translate our shows in 11 languages, but the podcast is something that we do linear, like 1 o'clock is a show for marketing, 3 o'clock is a show for our revenue, It's perpetual. Lots of other sources of information, not just our podcast, but podcasts of great talented people in our industry are on the Hospitality Channel, Hospitality Radio Station. You can go to hospitalityradio.com and catch us there if you want to, rather than the digital radio broadcast mediums that are out there, and Twitch and all that kind of fun stuff. So with all of that, thank you for the privilege of your time. My name is Lauren Gray, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.